Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal, where we invite you to explore the heart and soul of our company, Kivi Brothers Trucking. Through engaging storytelling, insightful market updates, and vibrant energy, our podcast reflects our culture, values, and achievements. Whether you're a team member or industry enthusiast, join us to build connections, foster growth, and inspire excellence. Discover why we're more than just a company. We're a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those aspiring to be part of something extraordinary. The pre-trip is complete and engines ready. We're set to hit the road on the Keep Trucking Personal podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back to Keep Trucking Personal. This podcast isn't about just giving a polished speech, even though John does keep his truck very polished, or about random people. This is real stories, real people, and building strong relationships. We're here to build an authentic experience for anyone who's listening to this podcast, whether you're a driver or you're in the office or you're just an industry spectator. This podcast is built for you, and we're happy to be here. I have John McDermott, a professional driver in our heavy haul division, and I'm excited to hear about his story, how he got into trucking, excited to hear about his large load that he just hauled recently, and maybe a little bit more of the tips he has on how to get into heavy haul and how he stays successful in it. So John, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. I'm glad you're here. Like I said, I'm excited to learn about what led you into trucking. Some of the loads that you've moved here are big. They're not just little machines. And even when I say little machines, you know, for example, you have a D9 on right now that's 80,000 pounds. That's a big machine, but it pales in comparison to some of the loads you've hauled recently.
Yeah, like it doesn't feel as big as it used to anymore, for sure.
Yeah, you're a little more comfortable, although you still always have to stay on point. You know, complacency is what scares you, but it's good to get that experience. So why don't you tell us how you got into trucking, what led you into trucking, and whether it started as a kid or when that kind of kicked off?
I never thought that I was going to be a trucker, to be honest. I started off in retail. You know, like as a kid, I saw garbage trucks, I saw other trucks, but I never really thought anything of it. And worked in retail at GNC for 9 years, from age 15 to 24. And then I left there, decided to go to a machine shop, and worked in a machine shop for a while. That's really what got me into it, was asking the driver who was late all the time, you know, like how much he got paid, talking about what he got paid. And I had no idea that there was actually money in trucking.
Yeah.
Like I was just working at a lathe at a machine shop, polishing parts. I decided to, you know, when we got the COVID relief checks, that's when I decided to pay for CDL school. I never had enough money to pay for CDL school. I'd always kind of thought about it, you know, through the years. Part of the story was, you know, like I was going to get into trucking for a different reason than I did now. I was the polisher, and we used to send these parts off to get polished to another company. And I designed this whole machine. You know, like I made a blueprint, showed it to my boss. When I showed it to him, he told me that he didn't want to make it because I was going to become successful and that he would lose me as an employee. And I was going to stay his employee, but also polish on the weekends because it was like 410s. You know, like I had 3 days off to just do whatever. When he told me that, I quit on the spot. I just decided, you know, like I'm going to go get my CDL finally because we just got that money. I was planning to do like a mobile polishing kind of thing with trucking, but I was going to buy like an old single or double axle that needed work, polish it up, and then pull around a mobile trailer and like travel race circuits and truck shows. But I found out quickly that was not going to be like the most profitable thing to try to go after. Yep. Then I got my CDL. I went to first job I had was pulling coils, beams, stuff like that on flatbed. I knew I wanted to be on my open deck when I started. I did that for about a year, and then I switched over to the wind division side of that company. Like I worked with a blade crew for a little bit, mainly did the hubs and drivetrains. So that got me introduced into like low boy. Like I learned how to do the securements that I needed to learn, like, you know, like learning what a direct and an indirect was and why you do it this way, and working different angles of a trailer, working with low ground clearance, work permits. Sorry. Had to figure out how to work permits. And one of the guys showed me en route. I talk to you about en route all the time. That's my favorite as far as route planning and just getting the route correct.
So your story is like a fast tracked story, right? Like many people, I think, in this industry almost like put heavy haul at such a high pedestal that maybe it's not reachable, right? And you've been able to accomplish that in 3 to 4 years, go from never even being in trucking, which is also a unique story. A lot of people come through this via a family member or, you know, a friend, and you just to kind of rub shoulders with a delivery guy and then say, hey, there's opportunity to get paid well. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, to get into the industry and then to get into the open deck right away, and then also moving oversized. And then, you know, we'll get to what some of the loads you've moved, but what would you give if you had to give somebody advice that's looking at, like, I want to get into that big stuff?
Wherever you're at, like, I just think if you can set your mind to doing something and like have a goal, like don't take no for an answer. Like for heavy haul, especially, like when I wanted to get into heavy haul, I was doing the hubs and stuff over at that other company. And I told them that I wanted to move up to 13 axles. Like that's my goal. And like the office guy said, you will never get that here. Like you don't have enough experience to do whatever. That's kind of when I decided to leave that company too. Like I went back to do coils and beams for a little bit just to kind of regroup. Just never take no for an answer. Like if you work hard enough and you plan, like you have to have a plan set in to everything. Just figure out how to get there. For me, it was, you know, having the heavy haul experience over at that company, like that helped me leverage to another one. Like I don't like jumping companies. I've only worked for 2. I don't plan on going anywhere. I like it here with anything in life. You know, that's how I kind of base my life is just, if you have a goal, get after it, you know?
Yeah, it's admirable, like, to be passionate like that and carry through. So being gone, obviously you worked, when you said GNC in a machine shop, you were home every night. What was it like when you changed from being home to being out on the road? Was it exhilarating? Like, did you feel free and like, hey, this is awesome? Or was it nerve wracking or what?
When I first started, it was like, I don't know where I am because I never made it past Tennessee before. And I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. You know, like I drove out by myself one time, went to Cades Cove, Tennessee, and I was like, this is really far. You know, it's like 3 hours away from Charlotte. At first, it was really confusing just to be out on my own, you know, navigating, trying to, like, they're like, you're taking it from Chester, South Carolina to Akron, Ohio. And I'm like, all right, how am I going to get there? You're like, I didn't have a GPS yet or anything, you know, wouldn't rely on that 100%, you know, it's still a useful tool. It was pretty wild at first, you know, being home every night. I prefer this because, any job I could get before, I didn't make enough money to really do anything besides just go home and look at the wall, you know?
I talk about it all the time. Trucking is a lucrative industry, especially it can be limiting if you don't understand it. And that's kind of a lot of the purpose of this podcast is to unpack like what it means to be a professional driver, because it is not easy. You can obtain your CDL, you can be a driver and still not get to the other side of the hurdle. That is like understanding miles, understanding hours of service, and then bundling all that up and doing it legal and then putting the miles down. Like you have to truck. Like this is a game of still trucking. It doesn't matter what, you know, sometimes I think some people get comfortable with I'm just being that I'm out on the road, I'm working, but you have to actually like get things done. And when you get things done over and over and over and you do it safely, you can be very profitable. And I think it goes to show, you know, like you said, from your standpoint, like that's a good opportunity. It's a good industry, and you don't even have to know about the industry to get into it. You can dive right in.
Yeah, you can always learn more too. Like I'm still learning every day. Like I feel like when I stopped learning, I've failed myself. You know, like even at the machine shop and anything. Like I powerlifted before, like competitively did that, and then like at work, like even just polishing parts. Like I'm like, how can I do this more efficiently and faster, even if it's just 10 seconds faster a day? You know, like you can always move up and get faster and get better.
So when you worked at GNC, was that to support, like you said, powerlifting and fitness goals, or how did that go hand in hand?
Yeah, because I was powerlifting, and like I wanted to apply to the GNC store. I didn't know anything about that either when I got into it. I was 15,
Yeah.
and I just knew that they had it kind of surrounded what I was into back then.
Yeah.
And they offered to sponsor me, which is just giving me free protein bars and shakes and stuff.
So do you still carry a lot of those traits with you out on the road, or do you watch what you eat or try to eat high protein focused? Like, does any of that stick with you still?
I'm still conscious about it. I'm definitely not as dedicated as I used to be. Like, when I was competing, that was like my whole life. I didn't even really take a lot of supplements back then, but it was like, like I'd eat 10 eggs for breakfast and like a half cup of oatmeal. Then every 2 hours after that was like a whole chicken breast and a cup of rice. And that's what I ate every day for like 3 years straight. So, I mean, I don't like chicken breast anymore. I like to enjoy a little bit more food now.
Yeah. The discipline factor is kind of what I'm trying to edge out. And that's, you find something, you put your mind to it and you see it through and you execute on it. And that kind of leads, so obviously you've had a very cool getting into trucking, fast tracked, I would say. A lot of that comes from your attention to detail, whether it comes to routing and like you said, reading permits and ability to go into whatever it takes and kind of get your hands dirty, one would like to say, not be afraid of like questions or how to do this, relationships, as I said earlier in this podcast, this podcast is built on is relationships. And I know you've found a lot of people that you could look to as mentors. And I'm sure there's people that you're giving this same advice to as well, helping to grow. But moving into a superload now. So I think it's very interesting, and anyone that's followed me on like whether it's LinkedIn or anywhere has probably seen your videos. Like I love what you've been able to do with video content and how you create it and put it together. And it's just amazing. People really get an inside look, which you don't very often, of what a superload looks like. Let's talk a little bit about your trip from Texas to Michigan, right?
Yeah.
So Texas to Michigan as a straight line, it looks pretty cut and dry, right? Like as a normal line haul trucker, you're going, okay, boom, boom, boom. Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, boom, and you just shoot straight up and you're there. And it's a little bit different of a route concept when you get not only heavy, but you get extremely wide and extremely tall. Does it mess with you, before you tell me how you get into it, does it mess with you knowing like to go from Texas to Michigan, which would be northeast, you had to head straight west? And for quite a while before you could even head north, before you could even head northeast, start pointing towards Michigan. Does it take time to like, and why I'm asking this is I've had a lot of people in my time asked to get into heavy haul. And I've seen it also where these people are very good at driving, but it really messes with them when they have to understand that a permit dictates where they go and how they go. And it also might not be the most efficient route because of obstructions, whether it's bridges or weight. So does it mess with you and you're like, I have to go straight west before I can even go north?
It doesn't like bother me. It's kind of astonishing. Like when you look at it, you're like, wow, that's a lot of extra miles. I guess we're not getting out of Texas today.
Yeah, for sure.
There's probably a good reason that they're sending you that way, especially with the last load we did. Like there's being 17.5 tall, there's a lot that can be in your way and you can't move those most of the time.
Yeah. And I think you look at it just like you've done anything, right? Like you kind of head down, this is a mission, right? I'm on a mission right now. I'm not so worried about getting there tomorrow morning, as many of us can feel like, right? Let's hammer down. You were able to piece it out, break it out. And that's something that it's a very well done. I hands down, hats off to you. Like, I think the way you package those trips up, talk about how you put together a segment. Like when you look at a trip, it's large. I know you kind of have a 1, 2, and 3 like options. You give yourself options all over the place and you study it.
Yeah, pretty much. I like break it down by days. Like you can plan the whole trip out, but it's probably not going to work out that way most of the time. You could have a flat tire or whatever. So you have to plan for all that. Like I usually, for like that load, getting out of Texas, you couldn't do as many, but I would say like 250 is what we're shooting for minimum. You still have to have a plan of where you're going to park, where you're going to get fuel, if you can drop your trailer to go get fuel because you can't bring the trailer in to go get fuel, you have to think about where you're going to take a break, for like a restroom break, like you're running with a big crew. Sometimes they got to go. So got to do that.
Those are things that nobody puts. I mean, you have a dog, right? So you have those little ancillary extra stops that you might not budget for per se, but there it is. It pops up. Dog's got to go or something. I've been with escorts where they're like, and I know you've been where they're like, we got to stop. Dog's got to go to the bathroom, or and you're just getting momentum, and so those little things kind of hang you up. But finding a place to park that you can get in, and you can turn around, whether or not even you're getting fuel there. What kind of parameters do you try to find, just based off experience? Somebody's been through there, or are you just surveying the land and like, this looks like a lot?
I go through the whole route, like everything. Like after I route it, like I'll go back through on Google Maps, honestly, or like I'll use Trucker Path first to see if I can find a spot on our route. Then after that, I'll actually zoom into it, look at the entrance, look at the exit, see. For that load, I like to park on either curbs or just big, wide open spots. Like I'm not trying to make it in between other trucks or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not trying to back in, jackknife into this, but like you're planning ahead enough to say like, and I come in here, okay, I can make it in here. That's half the battle. The other half of the battle is I need this 200-foot section of curb to be open too, so that I can park there. And if it's not, I'm going to have to figure out a plan. Yeah.
You can't rely on just one spot. Like, it's good to have that as like in the back of your head, like in case that one is full, like, is there something that we might be able to park at farther up, kind of like the post office that we parked at going through Texas, just there was nothing else there. That's all we could make it to. So they were closed on Sunday. We'll be out of the way here.
Yeah. And you're up against permits are only valid for so many days and every state's different. So you also can't completely just take your time. You're up against the clock, like trying to make sure you get out of there. And you as the operator, there's people assisting you, right? Escorts or bucket truck or police in that aspect, and they have things to do too. So they want to make sure that you're accomplishing the mission in a timely manner and effectively. How does it scale up when you went from maybe hauling a windmill hub to where you didn't have escorts to now you might have 3 escorts and a bucket truck? Like, does it make you feel a little bit like you have to be more prepared and planned out so that you're giving them orders to these people?
Yeah, like I don't like to come off as underprepared at all. Like I like to, at the end of the day, I would always have kind of like a post meeting, talk about how the day went, if we needed to change anything. And then I'll go into like what we're planning to do tomorrow, when we're planning to start, when we're planning to end, my options that I already chose the night before. Like that's one thing. It's a big difference is like, like at the end of the day, doing like pulling a D9, like right now, like where you don't have so many restrictions, you can pretty much drive until you have about 2 hours left and then find a place to park. And it's no big deal. But like for a big load like that, before I even get moving, I have to have a plan of where we're going to make it. And then when I get parked that night, I'm up for about another 2-3 hours planning the whole entire next day. So you have to have that to present to, the crew that you're with, like your bucket trucks. And if you're getting police, you have to be in contact with them already. You have to contact local municipalities of when you're going to be going through their jurisdictions. There's a lot more to it. You got to stay on top of a lot more. But if you just do it all planned out, like you got to plan when you're even going to call somebody.
Yeah.
To stick to it.
And I think you do a great job. I know you do a great job. It's not even just my perspective of that planning. And I see it. And even from an office perspective, a lot of times we don't get to see that. We have a lot of trust we put in our drivers when we give them the information, and some of them are very quiet in communicating back, right? They know the mission, they take the paperwork, they do their work, and they go. You do a very good job of communicating back and also giving insight to like, here's the route, here's my map, here's my 1, 2, 3, here's what I'm thinking, here's what could happen, if we run into weather or flat tire, like you said, here's what I plan. And you communicate back a lot, which is very appreciative, like to see the inside again, because we try to prepare you as well as we can, but there's still a lot of factors that we're just sitting behind a desk. We're not there seeing it. Your boots on the ground. It might look like a perfectly easy route, and you get there and it's a 20% grade uphill, and you're like, this is steep. Like this isn't just an easy, or this turn on the permit is not doable. Like it's very tough. There's just a lot of factors that you run into that we can't see, and you share that very you do a great job, and it leads to like your videography. Like you're very involved with whether it's taking pictures or flying your drone and putting that together. Is that like a passion? When did that passion come together, and how does that fuel you to try to create these cool videos of your trip and your truck and unique shots?
Like what fuels it, I guess, is just, a lot of people don't get to see what I do. Like even when you're taking a 1,500-mile run, like you're on these back roads that normal trucks aren't on. Like I don't get to pass a bunch of Kivi trucks and say, "Hey, what's up?" Like because we're in the middle of nowhere the whole time.
It's the path least traveled. I believe it especially when you get big and wide and heavy and tall, however you want to measure it, you take the path least traveled. It's like the sayings, the books, to become anything great, like you have to take the path least traveled. And it's funny because it truly means that when you're in a super load, like you're hauling an extremely large load and you're in the middle of nowhere. Like, and it's funny because people that see you, I know a lot of, retired old truck, like you'll be driving by and they're like, what is this thing coming through our town? Like, why is this huge load, lights flashing everywhere? Why is it on this road? Because a normal person would think, get on the interstate and go, right? Like get on a main highway and go.
Yeah, that's what a lot of the people where we delivered out there like said, y'all just take like 30 this way and then 70 across this way. We're like, no, there was no highways the entire time.
Yeah, you're literally trying to find a path with no bridges and no overhead structures. And then that's half the battle. And then roads that can sustain the weight. And so it's interesting. But so to your video, it's just a passion for you to share what you do. And where do you post it? Where do you share it? Other than sending it to me, which I appreciate, where do you share with all that stuff?
I try to put them on YouTube. I don't do YouTube as like it's not like my channel, like come support me, like I just do it as like an archive to save my videos there. And when I want to show somebody, it's a lot easier to just pop it up or people can share it around. I don't care, but I just like people to see what they don't get to see. Like, 'cause, I mean, there's no other way that they could experience it. Like when we went through Baxter, which is not in the middle of nowhere, we had to do that at 3:00 in the morning because if there was traffic, we wouldn't have been able to wrong way streets and
and I have a cool clip that you sent me and I've posted it fast forwards and parts that need fast forwarding, but it shows, and that one to me is like, and it's not like showing a bunch of the truck and the load, but it's just showing what it takes and the attention to detail, and it's great. Like it's an awesome clip, and it's like sometimes it's the most raw footage that is like the most impactful. But so tell somebody that's never had a police escort. And I think your experience when one of them was funny, like knocking on the door or the window, they're there early and hitting you with the flashlight like you did something wrong.
Yeah, like they're usually really cool. Like when you get met up with them, like depending on who they are, like the first one I ever had, like they wanted to check our ID, check our insurance, check everything, go over the truck with us. And then the next time he was just like, let's roll, man. You got a radio? Let's go. And then but for like that night move, like there was 2 police escorts. Like they met me at like 3:00 in the morning. They got there earlier than I got up, so they're shining the flashlight. They're like, "Let me see your ID," and I'm like, "Hey, let me grab it real quick. Hold on, stop shining me in the face."
Let me wake up a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because it's in trucking, like we deal with that, and sometimes it's hard to find a parking spot, and you're pushing the limits, and somebody's going to be knocking on your door, or you park in a parking lot that's extremely full, and somebody needs to leave at 3 a.m. They're going to knock on your door. Hey, man, can you back up and move so I can get out? Help me out, And so it happens to a lot of people. There's still no way to like kind of avoid that shock of like, I didn't do anything wrong. Honestly, I'm trying to do everything right, even though it was meant to be to put together. You know what I mean? Like they're there to see you intentionally.
Yeah, I was glad they were there early. Like they were just there a lot earlier than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, I guess.
But like when I met up with them, like before we went through Baxter, like the day prior, we parked about 20 minutes away. Like I drove up with a high pole truck and we physically checked everything after another driver actually checked some of the stuff for us.
Mm-hmm.
But just to verify and make a plan. Like I had the turns, I had all the lights we had to go around, but then I like made another spreadsheet and showed like what maneuver we're going to make on each one. And I passed that to the officers too. So they were on board. Everybody's on board. I mean, it felt like even after watching the video, like in the moment, I wasn't watching everybody like, this is so cool. Look at him and look at him. But afterwards, I'm like, wow, it was like watching a football play almost on some of those where everybody just does what we needed to do and get matched right back up.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's awesome. For me, it was like, this is the stuff that it's all about. Like, we don't get to see this, and it gives you you just feel extremely proud after when and I'm sure you feel that way. The level of like gratitude, like that was awesome. I went through it like super, like it's like a football play, everybody lined up and hiked the ball and everybody ran their routes and you got a touchdown. And
yep.
Like all of your stories just awesome leading up to it. And then I would be doing wrong if I didn't mention the safety factor, right? So we have Motive in all of our trucks, and Motive is not only there to help benefit you in the event it needs to. And I have a good story real quick I'll tell on Motive. So we actually had a driver that had an incident happen that there's no way you would be able to predict, right? Like he had a personal instance happen where he ended up becoming unconscious for a short minute and the truck went off the road and into the ditch. Motive, I'm going to say within 10 seconds of that happening, I literally got a text message saying there was a severe situation and you needed to help. And I know that might seem like, okay, that's extensive, but there was 4 of us within minutes of that happening on the phone, making sure that there was an ambulance and the 911 was called. I'm assuming it was already naturally handled just because of somebody seeing it. But we were already like, we need to make sure that this is done. Well, who's going to do this? We've already called this. And this is all within 5 minutes, like a bunch of people getting together. And that's just, safety is important to us. And it just assembled a group in a matter of minutes. And it's just because Motive their technology is growing and growing and growing. And it's sensed that something went wrong outside of the truck leaving the road. It saw that the person, because it does that, has its own algorithms and it recognized this is not normal. Like this is a situation and you need to get involved. When you think of you guys being out there alone, traversing the country, that something happens and, God forbid it does, you want to make sure that you get help right away. And so for me, it just helps support it. But where I'm going with this is Motive is a safety tool. It helps not only the driver, but it helps keep the driver safe and focused on the duties that they need to do daily. And you maintain a very good safety score, typically a 100. And a 100 is not easy to do. And think of the fact that John is moving extremely large loads at night, having to straddle center of the lanes, this and that, doing anything he can to make sure he can make the turns, all of this, and still to be able to maintain a 100 safety score is not easy to do. Is there an extra level of attention you pay just to that to make sure that you can stay on top? And
well, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to maintain 100, as long as you just do what you're supposed to do. I don't drive like a psycho anymore. Like I'm not 15, I used to.
Yeah, so it's holding you accountable, but you said you nailed it. Like a lot of people ask, and so that's a good way to put it. If you do everything just as the law says, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Motive doesn't really affect anybody. It gives you can maintain 100 safety score.
Yeah, I mean, and whenever it does ding me for something, like if I slow roll the stop sign, or if I don't really get a whole lot. Like it's usually slow rolling a stop sign is what I get. Like I'm like super attentive to stop signs after that. And
and even on a super load, like you're with police, it's funny because there's situations where we have to say this isn't legit because John was actually told to go. There's a cop blocking the intersection and they're waving him through.
Yeah, that's different though. Like if you have a cop or like a bucket truck blocking traffic, like if you're going around a turn and there's a grade to it, we're not trying to stop on that, because that's
a situation.
That could turn into a worse situation than just holding traffic for a second and going through.
Yep. Well, I want to commend you on that. Like I said, this whole thing leads up to like you can excel, you can move through getting your license, getting into big loads, RGN, multi-axle Jeep and booster, police escorts, bucket trucks to lift power lines if needed, or street signs to 3 escorts. Like you can achieve anything and still be at the peak on safety. Like you don't have to give a little here to say, okay, I want to be an RGN guy. I got to be a cowboy and I got to get rid of this score. Like you can maintain top level professionalism, top level safety and growth, all while doing it to the highest standard.
Yep.
That's commendable. And like I said, it's everything that you keep displaying and the hard work and all of it, it gets noticed.
It does. Like, that's what I'd like to, if anybody's like wondering how to get into it, also is like, if you work hard enough and you show that you were like so into it, like it will get noticed. Sometimes you got to wait a little bit longer. Like, I feel like I was very fortunate for how fast I moved up, for sure. I almost didn't want to discuss how long I've been doing it.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, but I think there are a lot of people that can get very passionate about whatever they do. I like to try to live my life in that same manner. Like, if I'm going to be involved in it, like, I want to give it my all. I want you to say, hey, like he helped me, or he did whatever he could to help me. That's how I just want to live life. And I think you display that on the trucking side, right? Like, I'm going to deliver whatever I have to do to the standard that I think is the highest, and you do it day in and day out.
And ask questions. Like, if you don't know something, like, ask somebody who does know, or research it. Like, there are many nights, and I still do it, where I've watched YouTube videos of other people doing bigger stuff, or how they secure something, or how this trailer works, or anything. Just if I ever wonder about something, I mean,
yeah, it's
Chat GPT,
at the
whatever.
tip of your finger. You can search it, find it. You can call somebody. Yeah, you got a great story, man. And I think I'm going to, we didn't really unpack that full trip.
Yeah.
I think we should have an episode where we just go through and unpack that trip. Like, we just talk about it, because I want to see other people understand what it takes to perform at that level. It takes a lot of phone calls, a lot of people calling, a lot of mentors. I'm sure there's a list of people, if we wanted done, you could say, hey, I talked to this guy, this girl, like, everyone's given me advice and input, and it all came together. So there's a long list of people that play in, but to set that, to think of what planning looks like, to talk through it, to get loaded, to know where to put it on your trailer, to know how to mechanically incline, to mess with some things, right? Because there's a lot of things that go into that trailer and the load and the truck, and making sure that, hey, I got a few tools to do this, or I can problem solve, or, and setting the stage to then get ready to leave, and then the trip and the planning. So, if I think that's something we should do, set one up and go through a whole trip.
Yep. There's a lot of times that you have to do some little maintenance here and there, especially when it's that cold for it too. Like, being mechanically inclined does help. I'm not a mechanic by any means, but if you can figure out how to fix a frozen airline, or a frozen tank, or a frozen modulator that comes off the tank, or, like, there's a lot of things you can get yourself out of without having to call roadside, and that helps for sure. But there's ways to prevent those things from happening too, besides just regular maintenance, But
yeah, you got to predict what's going to happen sometimes, and because, like you said, external factors, weather, and this and that can lead up.
Yeah, carry tools with you and everything. Got to be prepared.
It's good. It's a good investment. The time when I went to Alaska, it wasn't a truck that I drive, right? I was in the office, and it's funny because a coffee can, I went into our parts room and I was grabbing fittings. I went through I was like glad hands, fittings. I had this, gaskets for like all the little things that can stop you in a trip, that I'm like, okay, we could have this, and some tools. I knew what tools, because I was working in our shop a few years before that. So I was already familiar with, trying to repair. And to your point, like, it's the little bitty things that can cause a big delay. We had a good handle on that. We had some times we had to use the stuff, and it worked out in our favor. So yeah, it's good advice.
Yep.
Well, John, I appreciate you taking the time. This is a real story of a real driver who's on a real load right now. Like, I know you got things to do, and daylight is your restriction. If you're not moving in the daylight, you need to be parked. Yep. So I appreciate taking the time. I think we're going to set up another episode to fully unpack one of those trips across country, and let you just walk us through it, so that people can hear what it takes to actually move those 17'5" loads. That's just tall, right? And give them a little insight.
I'd be glad to.
Thank you for tuning in to Keep Trucking Personal. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to share it with others, and don't forget to follow more episodes. And John, once again, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Keep Trucking Personal. We appreciate you taking the time to explore the heart and soul of Kivi Brothers Trucking with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let us know your thoughts. Tune in next time as we continue our journey together. diving deeper into what makes us a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those who aspire to be part of something truly extraordinary. Until then, keep trucking, and we'll catch you on the next episode.